Hello guys and welcome back to my booktube channel I Read a Little. If you're new here, my name is Talia and in today's video I'm going to be talking about the books that I plan on reading in the month of February. So for February I am participating in a readathon called BlackAThon. This is being hosted by Jessie from Books and Bowties, as well as Francina Simone and Lauren from the novel Lush, I think is the name, and I will leave a link to all of the channels down below. And this readathon is happening throughout the whole of February and is coinciding with Black History Month as a way of celebrating Black authors as well as representation of Black people within literature. So this can be fiction or non-fiction. So I'm going to be talking about the books that I plan on reading throughout the month of February, and I think that this is only going to be my books for the readathon because I have quite a few to read and I'm quite busy at the moment, so I doubt I'll be able to read anything else. So what I'm going to do is just list off the challenges that have been created for this readathon. I don't think you have to participate in these challenges if you don't want to, but they are there just in case you do want to. So I'm going to read them off and then I'm going to go through the books that I plan on reading. I'm not going to talk about how the books that I've picked coincide with the challenges. I'm pretty sure they do in some manner or form, but I just can't be bothered to like list it, so I'll go through the challenges and then we'll talk about the books that I have picked. So the first challenge is Feel the Love, read a book any genre featuring romance between two Black people or one Black person and a person of colour. The next challenge is Wakanda Forever, read a graphic novel or comic series with a Black or African main character. Hear Us Any, work by a Black/African author. Feel the Beat, spoken word, listen to these 4 poems and share your favourite on social media or with a friend. Discuss what this poem means to you and why it matters. And then there are links to 4 YouTube videos of spoken word poems and I'll leave them linked down in the description bar below. The next challenge is More Than a Colour, we house complexity within us, read a book starring an intersectional Black character, brackets, Black and LGBT, Black and neurodivergent, Black and disabled, etc. The next challenge is In This Together, read the group book Poet X by Elizabeth Acevedo. Unfortunately, I can't get hold of Poet X for cheap and I am poor because I'm a student, so I won't be participating in the group read, but if you can, I highly recommend that you do because I've heard great things about the Poet X. So we're just going to get into the books that I'm going to be reading. I've tried to pick a lot of fantasy science fiction books because that is the genre that I particularly enjoy. Unfortunately, I couldn't find that many fantasy sci-fi by Black authors that I hadn't already read that were easily available to me. I've picked what I can and I've also delved into some different genres that I wouldn't normally read, so I'm quite excited about that. So the first book that I'm going to be reading for the readathon is The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. I've wanted to read this for ages. This was on my Christmas wish list. Unfortunately, I didn't get given it for Christmas, so this is a good excuse to finally pick it up. This was recommended to me by Books with Emily Fox, who has read it and really enjoyed it, and I'm super excited to read it. So I don't know much about this story other than that it's set in a place called the Stillness, I believe, and it's sort of during an apocalyptic time where a rift has kind of opened up in the world and is slowly like destroying everything. And we follow one particular woman whose husband and daughter, I believe, have been kidnapped, and she goes on a kind of quest to find out what has happened to her daughter. I think there are a lot more elements to this story than what I've just said, but that's all that I personally know about the storyline, and I'm super excited to read it, really looking forward to this one. And this is definitely fantasy, I believe, or fantasy/sci-fi type. I think it's more fantasy. If you're looking for a fantasy book to read for the readathon, I definitely recommend this one. Okay, so the next book that I'm going to be reading is Who Fears Death by Nnedi Okorafor. Okorafor, I think. Nnedi Okorafor. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I apologise if I'm not. And I didn't realise that this is being turned into a television series by George R.R. Martin, which I'm like kind of excited about. And the cover is like beautiful. I picked it up at the library and I thought, holy shit, this looks really cool. I think this is kind of fantasy. So basically, it's set in post-apocalyptic Sudan, and there are 2 tribes. So there's the Nuru tribe, who are basically oppressing and killing off the Okeki tribe. one particular man from the Noira tribe ends up raping a woman from the Okeki tribe, who inevitably becomes pregnant and gives birth to a daughter. The daughter, I think, is raised by a shaman who kind of discovers that she has mysterious magical powers, I believe, and she basically goes on a quest to like free her people. That's kind of the gist I'm getting from the storyline. I don't know if that's actually what it's about, but from what I've read, that sounds like the storyline to me, and I am really looking forward to reading it. It says both wondrously magical and terribly realistic. Oh, I'm so excited. And then if like I enjoy it, it's being turned into a TV show, so that's pretty cool. Okay, the next book that I'm going to talk about, I basically found it in my library and I picked it up because I thought the cover looked cool. I don't really know much more about it other than that. It's We Need New Names by Noira Bulawayo. And I don't really know much about it. I just thought that the cover looked amazing, like really colourful, so I kind of picked it up. I read the inside blurb, and it basically follows the story of a 10-year-old girl called Darling who is living kind of impoverished in Zimbabwe. She gets the opportunity to move to America, and we kind of follow her life as a new immigrant living in America, and that's really all I know about the story, but really excited to read it. Okay, the next book that I'm going to be reading is An Unkindness of Ghosts by Rivers Solomon, and I really just picked this up because it's set on a spaceship, and I was a bit like, I want to read some science fiction, and it's set on a spaceship, so I guess it counts as science fiction, so I picked it up. And it's basically, I don't know much about the storyline other than that it follows the story of a girl called Asta who is living in the lower level slum-like area of the HSS Matilda, and she's basically a general dog's body on the ship, and I don't think she's treated very well. And essentially, I think the ship like is basically a ferry to ferry like rich assholes to like their final paradise, essentially. From what I read about it, that's what I garnered. And I think that Asta finds out some information about the recent sovereign's death in relation to the death of her mother, and then this creates kind of like an uprising of the kind of impoverished lower slum area of the ship in regards to the way that they are treated by the like assholes up on the top higher rich end of the ship. I don't really know much more about it other than that, but I didn't really need to. It's science fiction. I really love a good sci-fi novel, so I'm looking forward to reading that one. Okay, so the graphic novel that I'm going to be reading, I was recommended by Noira Reads, and I'll put a link to her channel down below, and it's basically Abbott issue 1, I believe, and you can get this as an e-comic online for about £1.80, so I'd highly recommend, because obviously if you are strapped for cash, it's an easy graphic novel that you can get a hold of, and I'm really looking forward to reading this one. It follows our main protagonist, who is this badass investigative journalist, and if you see, like, I'll put the cover up here, she looks completely badass. She's just like leaning nonchalantly against a car with like a cigarette and just doesn't look like she gives a fuck about anything, and I was just like, I need to read this. It follows her story as she is essentially on the discouragement of others, looking into these mysterious grisly murders that are happening around where she lives, and I think there is some sort of connection between these murders and her husband. I think her husband has passed away, whether that was from a murder or other circumstances, I don't know. But there is a connection between her husband and these murders, I believe, and she is basically investigating them and trying to find out what has happened, and this kind of leads her down the route of kind of a cultish type movement, I believe, and it follows her basically as she's trying to unearth the truth behind these quite horrific murders that have been happening. I had a brief look into the like comic, and the art style for this is amazing. I personally really like it. It kind of reminds me of Neil Gaiman Sandman series type vibes, the art style for that, if you've read it, and I really love that, so really looking forward to reading this one. I've also put on hold at my library volume 1 of Cyborg, but it's not available to me at the moment, so if that does become available I will also be adding that to my TBR. Okay, so the next two books that I'm going to talk about I picked up on the recommendation of Jessie from Books and Bowties. The first one is The Ballad of Black Tom, and this is basically a retelling of a H.P. Lovecraft story, and I don't really know much more about it than that. The reason that I got it was because on Amazon it was only $2.99, and that is like really cheap, so I thought I'd pick it up. And I'm kind of determined this year to read more horror slash thriller books, so this seemed to be a really good opportunity to get into one, so I just picked it up. And yeah, it looks really good. I think it's a novella, so it's not actually that long, which is really, really good for me, because I've got quite a few books to read for this readathon. Yeah, so I don't know much more about it other than that. So if you're looking for a kind of horror short story to read for the readathon and you live in the UK, I definitely recommend that because it is really cheap on Amazon at the moment. The other book that I'm going to be reading is, I think it's called My Sister the Serial Killer, I think. Let me just check. Yeah, My Sister the Serial Killer by Oyin Khan Braithwaite, I think is the author's name, and this is 99p at the moment on Amazon in the UK. So if you want to read that book, or you've wanted to read that book, it's 99p at the moment. Go and get it. And this basically follows the story of a woman and her sister is basically a serial killer, and she murders her boyfriends or something like that, and the other sister ends up having to clean it up, I think. And I don't know whether I'm just like particularly sadistic, but like it seemed really funny to me. I don't know whether it's gonna have comical elements or whether it's gonna be a really serious book, but when I was reading the premise of the story I thought it was hilarious. Like, I just thought it was really funny. So I don't know if it's a comedy or not, or whether it's actually quite dark. But it sounded really interesting, so I'd recommend picking that one up. Okay, so the next two books that I have on my TBR I might not necessarily be reading for this readathon. I've just added them if I finish all the other books and have time to read them. So the first one is Pride by E.B. Zaboy, and this is purely based on the fact that I am quite a big Jane Austen fan, and Pride is basically a retelling of Pride and Prejudice, I think. But with black characters, so that sounded really interesting to me. I'm always interested in reading a retelling of a Jane Austen novel, so if I have time I will be picking that one up. And lastly, because my battery is running out, the book that I really want to read as well is Black Leopard Red Wolf by Marlon James. This is over 600 pages long, I believe, and it doesn't come out until mid-February, I think, or beginning of February. If I have time I will be reading this, but I don't know because I have quite a lot to read. And this sounds super good. Like, it's a new trilogy and it sounds quite I think it's fancy, it sounds quite fantastical, and we basically follow the story of Tracker, who is basically like a PI, or like he basically tracks people down essentially, and he himself has quite an interesting past that I won't really get into because obviously it's like a spoiler of the storyline as a whole, but he's quite an interesting character, and he lives in a world where there's like 13 kingdoms and quite a few of them are under political unrest, and he is basically hired to track down a boy who is wanted for some reason by all of these kingdoms, and Tracker is hired to find him. He normally works alone, but he ends up having to kind of team up with a ragtag bunch of people who all have their own secrets and mysterious pasts, and I think one of them can transform into a leopard, so that really like sells it for me anyway. I don't really know much more about the story than that, but it sounds really interesting, and it sounds like it's going to be a trilogy, and it sounds quite epic. It's being compared to Game of Thrones, like people are saying that it's like an African Game of Thrones, and holy shit, like if that is true then I am sold. I think it comes out beginning / mid-February, but if I've got time to read it I'm definitely going to be picking it up. So yeah, those are all the books that I plan on reading for BlackAthon. Leave a comment down below if you've read any of those books and what you thought of them, and leave a comment letting me know some of the books that you plan on reading for the readathon if you are participating, and I will catch you guys in my next video. I may be vlogging for the readathon, I don't know. I'm really bad at vlogging. Like, I usually vlog like 5 minutes footage a day and then like forget to vlog, but if I do manage to do it and actually remember to do it, I will be vlogging, so I will either catch you in my reading vlog or I will catch you guys in the wrap up at the end of the month. But thank you for watching.